now watching Way Back Wednesday, sponsored by Davenport Auto Park, the ride of your life. And also sponsored by Flores Glass, serving the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to another episode of Wayback Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcox. It is 7:30. Our new time slot, of course, is 7:30 to 8:30. So if you've been missing part of the show, or you heard someone talking about the missed part of the show, be sure and tell them that we have moved the time slot from 7:30 to 8:30. Still on Wednesdays, and we're still replaying the show Saturday and Sunday afternoons at their regular times, as far as I know. So anyway, good to have you with us tonight. Couple things I just want to real briefly touch on from last week's show. You remember we talked about talked about A&P grocery store chain last week. And, during my research for last week's show, a couple things just really astounded me. Number one, I just never had any idea how big A&P was at one time. From its very humble beginnings as a little bitty small store up in New York selling coffee and tea initially, to literally growing to become the world's largest retailer, largest corporation. It was just astounding to me that they did that, first of all, and then the fact that they no longer exist is also something that just boggles the mind. And I mentioned last week during the show a comment that I had read actually in one of the articles I was reading about the demise, if you will, of A&P. And the author of that particular article made a special point of pointing out the difficulties that A&P had in certain parts of the country competing against Walmart. And if you remember, I made a comment, if you're looking for for something to say that this was a pinpoint cause of A&P's going under, Walmart certainly could fit that bill. But Eric called me after the show last week and reminded me that in different parts of the country it was different stores and different chains. He was exactly right, of course. In the 1970s, when Food Line came into this area, in the deep south, if you will, I'm sure they too put a tremendous strain on A&P as a chain. And so it was not just Walmart, of course, and it was not just Food Line. It was a combination of things that caused A&P to go under. Eric brought by my office this week a book that I've not had a chance to read in any detail, but I kind of browsed through it, and it's got an interesting title. I hold it up for you. It says, "Don't Make A&P Mad." It's by Mr. J.E. Davis. And so when I first saw the headline of the title of the book, I thought, well, this must be a book about the history of the A&P. Actually, it's not. It talks about the history of another grocery store chain, Winn-Dixie. The Davis family started a Winn-Dixie grocery store chain, and they competed for a while head-to-head, of course, with A&P, being in the same business. And so I have not had a chance to read the whole thing, but it's got some neat pictures in here. But I do want to share with you one excerpt, a couple paragraphs here that talks about, in fact, the title of this chapter starts off called "The Struggle Business." Mr. Davis says, "I have often used the expression, 'this is a struggle business,' to describe what selling groceries for a living is all about. You struggle with suppliers. You struggle to find good locations. You struggle with finding and keeping good people. You struggle to meet competition. You struggle with government problems. And you struggle to survive events over which you have absolutely no control, whether that be a hurricane or some demented person shooting up a parking lot or firebombing a store. This is a struggle business. It's quite possible that my opinion was solidified in 1935," he goes on to say, "the first year the four brothers were in charge of what was to become Winn-Dixie's destiny. In retrospect, it was probably the toughest year, all things considered, we were to encounter. The year was hardly underway when a discriminatory chain store law was voted in by the Florida legislature. The Florida Recovery Act of 1935 sought to limit or eliminate ownership of multiple units of business in the state. When that failed by one vote in the Senate, a substitute bill was passed which levied a $400 per annum chain store licensing fee and a tax of 5% on gross receipts of chains. This law forecast bankruptcy for Table Supply and the Davises. That was the name of their store initially, Table Supply, and other chains as well. The entry of Walgreens a nationwide drugstore chain, to the state of Florida was one of the triggers for the political trouble. Leasing top locations out from under the village druggist, one of the most popular citizens of the town, created part of the problem. Sears Roebuck also was expanding at the same time, and A&P's low price policies were particularly damaging. A&P went into depression in an enviable position, cash position, and they were getting about 12 cents of every $1 Americans spent for food and retail in the 1930s. So again, the title of the book is Don't Make A&P Mad, and it's about the Davis families putting together the Winn-Dixie store chain. But there are several references to A&P throughout the book. I thumbed through it and found several references that were talking about A&P and how they had to compete against A&P. So again, it was just interesting to me. As I said last week, I grew up when I was younger anyway, going to A&P with my mother, going grocery shopping, and very familiar with the store brands. And so it was just really interesting to find out those neat little things about the A&P chain, and it saddens me at the same time that they're no longer here. Okay, so tonight we're going to move on. We're going to talk a little bit about a little part of Edgecombe County called Medora. Who's ever heard of Medora? I had not heard of Medora until this week, literally this weekend when I was getting ready for the night show. I started doing some research. I stumbled across the name Medora purely by accident. And ironically, two things happened this weekend. Both were railroad related, and so I'll share a picture with you in a minute here that kind of got that ball rolling. And so then I was curious about Medora. It was, just to kind of give you a little background, it's a little small community just off the railroad tracks in Edgecombe County. And I'll show you a map in a minute to kind of give you an idea of where Medora was. It doesn't exist anymore. But it was a little town community. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a city. Wasn't very much there from what I could gather. The information I could glean was very, very limiting from the newspaper.com website. Found little or nothing on Google searches. So at one time, however, Medora was an up-and-coming little community. So anyway, let's start off tonight. First picture, and I hope Randy's watching, because I know that he does watch the show on occasion. So Randy Turner, if you're out there, got a picture of you. Let's go with picture number one if we could. I'm not sure this picture was undated. I actually found it on Facebook. I'm guessing it was in the 1970s. The caption reads, "It's not quite a drive-through, but not every Hardee's restaurant has room for a train. CSX transportation engineer Randy Turner found ample space at the Hardee's on Falls Road Thursday while he ate lunch." This is when the railroad track, of course, went right behind the Hardee's there at the intersection of Falls Road and Church Street. And so I just thought it was a neat picture, and you see the Imperial Center in the background there and the water tower, and of course that's Hardee's on the right-hand side there, at the back of Hardee's restaurant. But yeah, neat old picture. I say old, it's not that terribly old, but like I said, it was undated. It was actually, I saw it on Facebook, so I'm guessing it was in the 1970s. So anyway, Randy, there you are on the television, buddy. Okay, I mentioned Medora, and so I saw another listing that made a reference to this little community called Medora, and it said Edgecombe County, not far from Rocky Mount. Well, having been born and raised in Rocky Mount, being here most of my life anyway, I said, well, I've never heard of Medora, and I thought I knew most of the communities in the area. So I went searching, of course, as I normally do, tried to find out some information about Medora. The first thing I ran across was a little blip in a newspaper called the Tarboro Southerner from October 25th, 1900, and it was a wedding announcement. So Lee, if you would put up item number 2 for our viewers. It's a little bitty 2-sentence, actually it's a 1-sentence long, there you go at the bottom of the screen, and it was a wedding announcement. This was one amongst a whole list of wedding announcements that happened to appear in the paper that day. But it says, on the evening of the 17th, at the residence of the bride's father, Jesse Brake of Medora, Marion H. Richmond to Miss Kate Brake. So Kate Brake was, of course, Jesse's daughter. She married Mr. Marion Richmond on the 17th. And by the way, this article appeared, as I said, in the Tarboro Southerner, October 25th, 1900. And so by that time, obviously, Mr. Brake's daughter was grown. And I want to go back and do some more digging about Jesse Brake, because he was obviously, I'll share a few more little articles about him here. I didn't find any pictures. Like we're talking about back in the early 1900s, so there were no pictures to be found of Mr. Brake or Medora or anything like that. But he was a very prominent citizen, I guess the best way to say that. In fact, let's move on to number 3. This little article also appeared in the Tarboro Southerner, January the 9th, 1902. And it's talking about the county commissioners had a county commissioner meeting. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but down at the bottom there it says Jesse Brake offered to pay the county $50 for the use of the convict force to open a road, or rather to straighten and widen a neighborhood path to make it a public road. The matter was referred to Commissioner Killebrew. The proposed road is to run from Medora to the Tarboro Rocky Mount area. So, as it turns out here, Mr. Brake was very influential in Edgecombe County back in the early 1900s. I feel fairly safe in telling you that Brake Road was named in honor of Mr. Jesse Brake. Let's move on to number 4. Item number 4 appeared in the Tarboro Southern May the 1st of 1902. And, this is actually reminiscent of what happens quite often during political seasons. And we're, of course, right in the middle of one right now. But I thought it was kind of interesting. It says, this is an editorial, op-ed, if you will, and it says, there's nothing fairer or ought to give more satisfaction than a primary, if properly held, but if the bitterness is to be injected into them that attend the Simmons and Care primary. The fewer we have, the better for the party. I don't see why we can't work for our favorite without cowardly attacking his opponents. It is nothing but a convention in which every man has a chance to vote for his choice. As for solicitor, I think it would be a proper recognition of Governor Aycock's appointment to nominate C.C. Daniels for solicitor. He is honest, he is capable, he is available, with modesty enough to make him attractive and brains enough to give motive power to a well-balanced legal talent. He has shown himself well worthy of the place he has so faithfully filled. Besides, it is a bad policy to change a good man as soon as he has had a little experience in place. To put in a new one, however, well informed, will take some time to learn the ropes and get where his predecessor stops at. The old adage, to let well enough alone, has never worn out. So this was, as I said, an opinion piece, op-ed piece, Mr. Jesse Brake, that appeared in the Tarboro Southern in 1902, expressing his personal opinion about a candidate. And, he gives some pretty sage advice there, that we don't have to be ugly to each other. We don't have to be cutthroat with each other. We can disagree about politics and policy and so forth. We don't have to cut the knees out from each other when we're talking about candidates and so forth. So, very timely message there, 120 some years ago. Still very timely today. Okay, let's move on then. Number 5. There's another sad story here. Killed by train. Ms. Susan Williams, widow of John Williams, who was for many years a section master on the coastline, was struck by the Plymouth freight near Medora Thursday morning and killed. Ms. Williams was quite aged, probably 75. She was only one of 2 widow pensioners of the Mexican War. Said her dog cost her life, it goes on to say. Later reports show that Ms. Williams lost her life trying to save her dog. She and another lady were walking along the railroad when the freight came along. Her dog, which was following her, remained on the track. Ms. Williams attempted to seize the dog and the train struck them, killing both. So, sad little story there about the lady who tried to save her dog and ended up getting killed herself. But she lived in a community of Medora, or near there anyway. Okay, and so moving on to number 6, this article appeared in Daily Southerner, April 10th of 1920. And this was kind of neat too, because it just goes to show that people can change their mind. And this is another op-ed from Jesse Brake, living in Medora. And he says, I see that several counties have instructed their delegates for and against women's suffrage, which is all right, but when it comes to not voting for a man because of his stand on women's suffrage, it is like some cranks on prohibition that would invade our orchards and vineyards for private use. I have been opposed to women's suffrage on the ground that women were too pure and holy to dabble in politics. But since they are forging ahead in every avocation of life, I would say let all vote that want to. I have learned in the last 76 years that there is no better advisor in domestic affairs than a good woman, and there is ample room for improvement in public affairs. If it was not for women, I would not care if Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden now, and I would be floating around in the air like a microbe. You may call them ethereal things, fairies and angels without wings and all that, but they are power to be reckoned with, and when we see a thing is going to come, why kick? I would like to see the grand old state cast a deciding vote. So as someone who was previously against women's suffrage and the women's right to vote, he came full circle and said, you know what, let's let women vote. It's the right thing to do. And I, obviously I agree with him, but it just goes to show that people do change. They change their mind. They change their opinion about things. And I've often had that mindset, particularly when it comes to the Civil War. We talk sometimes about the Confederacy and the people who were in favor of slavery for one reason or another, and in later years decided no, it was wrong, and they changed their mind, and they were actually then opposed to slavery. And so it's good that people can do that, and people have done that, and will continue to do that, I'm sure. Okay, let's move on then. Number 7, this appeared in the Daily Southerner, April the 6th, 1920. It's a little short story here, a little short article. Mr. Jesse Brake of Medora near Rocky Mount was in yesterday and paid for his 54th yearly subscription to the Southerner. He remarked that he was 77 years of age and was serving as the oldest county commissioner in Edgecombe. Mr. Brake is a highly respected man and successful farmer. In paying his subscription, Mr. Brake remarked upon the larger news value of the Tarboro Southerner and was glad to see the home paper keeping in line with the rapid developments in the county. It goes without saying, Edgecombe County is older than Nash County, obviously. It was here before Nash County was. And there's a tremendous amount of history in Edgecombe County and in that area between Rocky Mount and Tarboro, and certainly Tarboro too, for that matter. But I think it's interesting that Nash County seems to have garnered more, I don't want to say publicity or more hype, but we sometimes forget about the rich history that exists in Edgecombe County and in Tarboro. And so anyway, when I ran across that, I said, you know what, it's just neat to talk about this history in this little town, this little community called Medora, that I frankly had never heard of. And I tell you what, I think before we take our next break, let's take real quick here. There's a couple more. Number 8, this is a little blip that appeared in the City Beat column in 1941. And it says, it's talking about a new atlas just come out. It says, although the atlas is published in Chicago and we have been living either Nash or Edgecombe County for the longest part of the past 2 years, the atlas taught us something about those brother counties. On the Norfolk branch of the railroad between Rocky Mount and Tarboro, we found these listed communities: Medora, Kingsborough, and Walto. Now, I'd never heard of those either. I'd heard of Kingsborough. I know this out on Old 64 between Rocky Mount and Tarboro is the Kingsborough community. Medora, as I said earlier, was new to me, and I'd never heard of Walto. So now I've got to do some more searching on Walto to find out where it was about. And I'm assuming somewhere close to these other two, Medora and Kingsborough, was Walto. And lastly, as far as newspaper articles, number 9, Lee, May 14, 1949, the town of Medora, North Carolina, was founded by a Frenchman, the Marquis de Moray, who named the site after his wife. That's where Medora came from. And lastly, while we're on the topic here, one last thing before I take a break. This is a map, number 10, Lee. This is a map of the general area, and I've got highlighted in yellow there the rough general area where Medora would have been, and I assume that these other two little communities, Walto and, of course, Kingsborough, were in the same general area. You can see there the map. That's Brake Road that runs kind of from southwest to northeast. And Meadowbrook Road runs across the top of there, and you see Rouse Road to the left. And right there, right through the middle of the screen, running from left to right, of course, is the railroad track. So these little communities were kind of little stops along it, if you will, on the railroad. And we got a call. Let's get a call. Hello, caller, you on the air?
All right, Medora was located out there where Brake Road crosses the railroad tracks going out of Rocky Mount towards Tarboro. It was a whistle stop on the Atlantic Coastline Railroad that left Rocky Mount and went to Tarboro.
Yeah, that's what I gathered. Do you ever remember anything about or hearing about Walto? That ring a bell with you?
No, I do not. Jesse Brake was a very prominent Rocky Mount area, Edgecombe County person.
Absolutely.
Born in 1844 and he died in 1926. He was a veteran of the Civil War. He became a prisoner of war in a Yankee prison in Elmira, New York. And the story goes about him that when the Civil War was over, Jesse Brake got back to Edgecombe County by way of Pat and Charlie. Do you know what Pat and Charlie is?
I've walked a many mile on Pat and Charlie. Yes, sir, I sure do.
That's how he got back to Edgecombe County. He owned a lot of land out there around where the fertilizer place is.
Right.
Brake Road.
Right.
I'll let you go.
Okay, buddy. Thank you. Have a good evening. Okay, it's time for our first commercial break. So, Lee, let's take that break. When we come back, we're going to jump back and show you a series of photographs from the 1940s. Well, actually, the photographs themselves are from the early 1900s, but they were reissued, if you will, brought back to the public in the 1940s in a column called Yesteryear Around Here. So, Lee, let's go ahead and take the break. When we come back, we'll get back to some old-timey pictures. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Way Back Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
There's a main nerve that leaves your back that goes into your hip and goes down your leg. It's called the sciatic nerve. A back injury can put pressure on that nerve, causing pain, numbness, tingling. Chiropractors can actually help that. At the Hammer Chiropractic Center on Sunset, we know exactly what to do. We have very good relationships with the doctors in Rocky Mount. We like to co-manage people's care. Some medications may help us do our jobs, and our jobs may help their medications work better.
Good to hear from you. Take care.
All right, good.
Bye-bye. That was Randy Turner. He saw his F on TV. Okay, so anyway, I mentioned before the break, over the years, the Rocky Mount Telegram has had several little pieces, if you will, that they run for several weeks, sometimes several months. We've talked a little bit. There's one called Landscapes. There were pictures and photographs of just the community at large and different events and people and so forth. We've shown a bunch of pictures from the Landscape series. But there was one called Yesteryear Around Here that started back in the 1940s, around 1941. And I ran through a series of photographs. And the neat thing about Yesteryear Around Here is the pictures, frankly, are not that great because they are pictures that the Telegram pulled from their archives. Back in the 1940s, they pulled these pictures that went back to the early 1900s. So the pictures themselves date back literally from the 1890s all the way up to the 1910, 1915 time frame. But they were reprinted, if you will, in the paper in the 1940s with a really neat caption beneath some of them. And so sometimes the picture itself is so-so, but the caption is more interesting in many cases than the picture itself was. Now, if you remember several months ago, maybe a year ago now, we talked about a man named J.R. Sorsby here in Rocky Mount who had a hardware store in downtown Rocky Mount, down on the west side of Main Street, down near the train station down there. He was a gentleman's gentleman, a man's man, if you will. Was very involved in outdoor activities, hunting, fishing, so forth. He would lead these excursions and camping trips out in the woods and so forth. And he had a series of photographs, and so some of those photographs made it into these Yesteryear Around Here series of pictures. And so I recognize some of these that we had shown before. So if you see one you think you've seen it before, you probably have, because some of these appeared in the Thorsby collection, as it was come to be known later on. And they also appeared in this Yesteryear Around Here collection. So without any further ado, let's go back to Yesteryear Around Here, number 11, Lee. October the 2nd, 1942 was the first one of these that appeared in this Yesteryear Around Here collection. That gentleman you see there is none other than Robert H. Ricks, who of course was involved with the Thorpe Ricks Tobacco Company. He was involved with the Ricks Hotel. He was involved with many banks and companies around town. But the caption is pretty interesting. This is on one of the camping excursions that was hosted by J.R. Thorsby. And the caption reads, "Mr. Ricks poses before his tent. Seated in front of his tent on one of the camps, Mr. Ricks provided Major Thorsby with a model as he placed his newspaper across his knee and looked into the distance. Mr. Ricks was the city's wealthiest citizen in 1900, and he was part owner and active direction of more corporations than any single individual in Nash County, if not in this section of the state. His philanthropics extended in the direction of then struggling A&M College, which later became NC State University, to whom he presented an administrative building that now carries his name. He gave freely to the cause of men in need who were fellow soldiers with him in the Confederacy, while the monument at the western tip of Battle Park was beyond Tar River at the Falls is a perpetuation in marble of himself, Captain John Thorpe, and two other companions who were with Henry White when he was killed in Bethel in the first battle of the Civil War. The Ricks Hotel carries his name, as does the tobacco firm of Thorpe and Ricks. He built the People's Bank building and was in the forefront of the city's advancement for a score of years. He often said that he didn't do much himself, but he had good men who did. And he was truly a mastermind and selection of men." So that's Robert Henry Ricks, and you know, he's been dead a long time now, and he frankly is now just recently, within the last year I think, been inducted into the National Twin County Hall of Fame, which was better late than never, as the old saying goes. He should have been in there years ago. But anyway, that was Robert Henry Ricks. That picture was taken somewhere around 1900. Okay, let's move on to number 12. This October 3rd, 1942 is when this picture appeared again. Like I said, all these pictures were from the archives of the Rocky Mount Telegram and the Rocky Mount Record, which was the predecessor to the Rocky Mount Telegram. They were both started by Josh Horn. But anyway, this caption, by the way, this is a picture of two ladies in a horse-drawn buggy, of course, and they're parked out in front of what used to be known as the old Lewis home, and now we refer to it as Stonewall Manor. The caption reads, "The Lewis home, an early Rocky Mount editor and friend. A photograph made about 1905 in front of the Lewis home place, which is just beyond Tar River at the Falls, overlooking the Rocky Mount Mills and Battle Park. Left to right, Mr. John B. Lewis, who was for some years editor of the Rocky Mount Phoenix newspaper, whose office was on Main Street near where is now located Belt Tile Department Store. Mrs. K.H. Lewis, the mother of the editor, and Mrs. Harry Demp are seated on the buggy. All are now deceased, of course. This was in 1942. They were already deceased by then. But just a neat old, I think I've seen this picture before, but the caption, as I said, was just interesting to me, that it identified the man, because I never knew who the old Lewis home was named after, but it was named after this man right here. And so there you go, a little history about the Stonewall Manor. Okay, let's move on to number 13. October 24th, 1942, this picture appeared. And it's kind of grainy, I realize, and I'll kind of tell you what it's about here. It says, "Pride of the Atlantic coastline in 1894. A view of the wood-burning railroad engine and engineer Captain John Campbell oiling up preparation for departure from the local passenger station for Spring Hope in Nashville, to which a single round trip was made in a day carrying both freight and passenger service. Captain Campbell operated this run for some years, although with the inauguration of the longer trip between Rocky Mount and Plymouth via Tarboro and Williamston, with the connection at Parmalee between Weldon and Kinston, he handled the passenger service for over that line for a number of years. The view was made from the porch of the Hammond Hotel, and where the trees are standing is now the Edwards Cutting Garage and Swift and Company. And again, this is 1942 when this caption was written. The picture dates back to 1894. So again, I apologize for the picture. It's grainy, I realize, and not very clear, but there's a couple little steam locomotives there parked out in front of then the Hammond Hotel. Okay, Lee, let's move on then. Number 14. This picture appeared in Telegram for the second time, I should say, November the 10th, 1942. And the caption reads, Tom Weston at his place of business about 1880. Oh, we got a call. Let's get the call. Hello, caller, you on the air?
All right, that picture that you just last showed about something that I think you mentioned, the Atlantic Coastline Railroad.
Right.
Pre-1900. The ACL, the Atlantic Coastline Railroad, did not come into existence until 1900. So, before that it would have been the Wilmington and Weldon Railroad. What was that document printed in?
Well, that was actually, you got to remember, this appeared in the paper in 1942. So the caption, I should say, was written in 1942. And by that time, of course, it was Atlantic Coastline Railroad. The picture was taken in 1894. So you're right, it wasn't ACL in 1894, but when they wrote the caption for the picture, it was 1942.
Gotcha. Because the railroad, ACL, didn't come into existence until the calendar year of 1900.
Right, exactly. All right, buddy, thank you.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Okay, so this is Mr. Tom Weston, and I know it's hard to see. I apologize again, these are very grainy, some better than others. But this is an interesting fellow right here. He says, Tom Weston has placed his business about 1898 on the corner of Sunset Avenue and Main Street, present site of the Planters National Bank building. Tom Weston was a respected colored drayman and the hitch post to which his horse is tied to his own property, and put there by arrangement with W.B. Middleton, owner of the dry goods and notions store over the sidewalk in front of which there was an awning at the time. Across the street is a dry goods store of A.W. Arrington, a one-story frame structure that can be seen in the background. Whenever Tom Weston was not on task of moving freight, baggage, household goods, or something of that sort, he was to be found at that location awaiting the call for the next customer. His charge for service in those days, we have been told, was to remove a trunk from any home in the city to the passenger station for 25 cents. If it was taken from upstairs in the home, the charge was 35 cents. A trip of reasonable distance with a dray loaded with household goods was 50 cents. By the way, a dray is just a buggy. It's a horse-drawn buggy. And Tom cared for his horse, kept up his dray, and raised a respected family from his business. So, 1898, Mr. Tom Watson, very enterprising young fella. I say young, I'm not sure how old he was in this picture. But in any case, he made his living hauling luggage and so forth from people's homes to and from the train station. When they would go on a trip, he would, they'd ride in their own buggy, and he would haul their luggage for them. When he came back the trip, he would load the luggage on his little horse and buggy and haul it back to their house. So, pretty enterprising there. Okay, Lee, let's move on then. Number 15. This picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram the second time, November 24th, 1942. And it's the officers from Rocky Mount at Camp Jackson in 1917. These were all officers that fought in World War I, 1917, but they're all from Rocky Mount. Some of these names may sound familiar. Jasper Proctor, George Walker, Robert D. Gorham, Carter Darrow, Frank Sproul, local attorney, the late Lewis Thorpe, Harvey Short, local justice of the peace, W. Stronach Wilkinson, that's W.S. Wilkinson, local attorney and chairman of the Nash County Draft Board at the time, and Esma Griffin, who at that time was president and manager of the Durham Fruit and Produce Company of Durham. So anyway, these gentlemen, all from Rocky Mount, were all officers and headed off to war in 1917, in World War I. Okay, let's move on then. Number 16, December the 1st, 1942. This picture we've actually shown before, and it's kind of grainy. And again, these are just really, really old pictures, and this was the second time, at least the second time, that they appeared in Rocky Mount Telegram. And by 1942, they were just probably getting pretty ratty. This was the entrance to the grist mill at Gold Rock, located where Highway 48 crosses Swift Creek in Nash County. The old mill house shows signs of needing repair, and since the photo above was made about 1900, it is believed to have been one of the last seasons of its operation. Its only service was to grind corn brought there from neighboring farms and to return meal after, of course, the millers told. The plant gave way to power from steam, and the mill and dam have long since yielded to the ravages of time, and at the present moment it is the site of W.M. Walker's lumber plant and gin at Gold Rock. So, you know, I'm an old grist mill nut. I just love old grist mills, and I have fished at that very spot many, many times over the years, and never knew until I started doing this show that there had ever been a grist mill there. It's surprising, really, how many grist mills there have been in and around Rocky Mount on the creeks and rivers around here over the years. There's been no less than a dozen that I can think of off the top of my head, none of which are still in operation, of course, but at one time they were all over the place. Okay, let's move on. Speaking of grist mills, this appeared December, I think, 3rd, 1942, and it is the Lassiter's Mill near Spring Hope, one of the better quality pictures amongst these. But it says where Highway 64 for Raleigh now crosses Tar River. And of course, this was before the 64 bypass that goes out that way now. So it's talking about what we now refer to as Old 64. But anyway, whereas Highway 64 for Raleigh now crosses Tar River, there's been a power development first of the grist mill and later as a hydroelectric development serving the town of Spring Hope. Shown here is the view from the bed of the river, which illustrates a fall of some 12 feet. Judging by the supporting rafters of the mill, the ponding area were along a vacation spot, while the shaded area on the north bank of the river provided a picnic area that was popular throughout this section. I never knew that was a hydroelectric mill on the Tar River that supplied power to Spring Hope, but there was. The remnants of this old grist mill, all the wood, of course, is long, long gone. But I've actually been to this location, and there are still remnants of the old dam there on the Tar River in that area. Okay, let's move on then. Item number 18. This picture up here for the second time in a telegram, December 15th, 1942. And as you can tell there, that's the post office down the bottom left-hand corner. And it says the city's new post office building as it appeared about 1920. The roofs of the buildings at 5 Points corner of Rose, Washington, Tarver Street, probably taken from a window of the First National Bank building, which a lot of us refer to now as the old, Rima coffee shop's in there now, of course, but anyway, it's been a couple of different names building over the years, but of course it was the First National Bank building in its original configuration. The post office building was started under the Wilson administration with his son-in-law W.G. McAdoo as Secretary of the Treasurer. Mr. Luther Tillery was the mayor at the time and handled the first shovel of dirt with appropriate ceremony. We're going to get to another picture here shortly, but you know, I didn't realize how long that tradition of a bunch of local dignitaries standing around with a shovel in the hand doing a shovel of dirt to start construction of a new building. It's been around for a long, long time, certainly at least in the early 1900s, and I'm sure before that as well. Okay, let's move on then. Number 19, December 21st, 1942. As you can see, these pictures were coming along during this Yesteryear Around Here series. These pictures were appearing every few days, every 3, 4, 5 days, another one would appear. And as I said earlier, they were pulling these from the archives of the Rocky Mount Telegram. And you know, it's a shame, but I've asked and I've inquired in the past, none of this stuff exists anymore. No one knows what happened to it. No one knows where it went. It's just all gone, sadly. It's probably all thrown away at some point. This caption reads, University School Faculty about 1899. The teachers of then private school that numbered an enrollment of more than 150 pupils and that provided instruction from beginner to college entrance requirements. It was the outgrowth of a school established in the late 1880s by Mrs. Betty and Yeti Bullock on the site of what is now the Cobb Foxhall Warehouse number 1 on the corner of Washington and Thomas Streets. Who knew there was a schoolhouse there? I never knew that. William Holmes Davis, as the head of this school, after he had removed it from Hammond Street at a point between what is now Grace and Pearl Street. In fact, it has been stated that Pearl Street was so named in honor of Mrs. Boyle, who prior to her marriage was Miss Pearl Cunningham. So anyway, again, the captions of these pictures to me sometimes are more interesting than the picture itself. Don't know these people, obviously, they've been dead many, many years now, but the fact that there was a school there on the corner of, Washington Street and, where did it say that thing was? Not Hammond Street, Washington Street and Thomas Street. I never knew that. Okay, let's move on then. Number 20, Rocky Mount Telegram, January 6, 1943. This picture actually is a picture of the old brick plant out there, North Church Street, out beyond the bowling alley on the right-hand side, long gone now. The caption reads, the initial brick plant for the Jeffries Ricks Clay Works as it appeared in 1902. The tram car for hauling the clay from the pit was drawn by mules, and it was progressively handled in carts that were mechanically dumped as is shown in the foreground to the right. Steam boilers and shaping units and keels are not shown. The making of brick in this, by machinery was a new venture about the turn of the century, although the Brakes had operated a small plant in Medora section of Edgecombe County, about 7 miles from the city. So, Mr. Ricks, of course, I mentioned a while ago, Robert H. Rick was involved with this, in addition to everything else was involved with around Rocky Mount in the early 1900s. And I just realized we about blew past our next commercial break. Let's go ahead and do that. When we come back, we've got a few more of these pictures to show and a few more little tidbits of information about the area from these old pictures. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Way Back Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
There's a main nerve that leaves your back that goes into your hip and goes down your leg. It's called the sciatic nerve. A back injury can put pressure on that nerve, causing pain, numbness, tingling. Chiropractors can actually help that. At the Hammer Chiropractic Center on Sunset, we know exactly what to do. We have very good relationships with the doctors in Rocky Mount. We like to co-manage people's care. Some medications may help us do our jobs, and our jobs may help their medications work better.
We're back. There's a lot of information here in these captions, and I guess I probably need to be spending more time showing pictures than reading the captions, but it's just kind of interesting to me, so I wanted to share some of these with you. Since we're running low on time, I'm going to kind of go through these next ones fairly quickly. Go ahead, at least put up number 21 if you would. This appeared January the 9th, 1943. It's a picture of the old Masonic Opera House down on Main Street. It was destroyed in 1904 when it burned, and then of course the Masonic Temple was rebuilt in the 1920s, the one that we know now by the old Sears building. But I've seen this picture before too, but this is interestingly enough, there were a lot of fairly significant events took place in this old opera house, one of which was the local rendition of The Wizard of Oz. Now, you know, The Wizard of Oz movie didn't come out till 1939. I'm not sure when the book was written, but in the early 1900s, they were doing The Wizard of Oz play, I guess you would say, or presentation there at the Opera House in Rocky Mount. So anyway, let's move on, Lee. Number 22, This picture was taken around 1900, it says, looking east in the 100 block of Sunset Avenue. To be exact, it was numbers 110, 112, and 114 Sunset Avenue. So if you're standing in Sunset Avenue, looking toward Main Street, looking east, this will be on the left just before you get to the Planters National Bank, which would be on your right. If you look at this picture, these are on the left. The Planters Bank will be on the right. And so, Lee, let's take a look at number 23. I took a snapshot of this area from a local standpoint. So there you go today. Some of you ladies may remember that building on the far left used to be Carol's Dress Shop. I forget what was in the building right adjacent to it, but of course across the street there on the right-hand side you see Planters Bank on the immediate right, or the old Planters Bank building, and then across the railroad tracks in the far right would be the former People's Bank building. But so anyway, let's move on, Lee. Number 24. This I thought was kind of neat. I did not remember seeing this here before. This dates back to 1900, and it shows tobacco processing plants of all places on Franklin Street, North Franklin Street. It was 1900 when the tobacco redrying plant in the foreground was the J.C. Braswell Company, with the late Louis Levy as the manager, while just up the street, immediately beyond, was the redrying plant of W.L. Petty and Company. So who knew? There used to be, in addition to all the warehouses and tobacco processing facilities and so forth that were on Church Street and Washington Street and in that area, they were on Franklin Street as well in the 100 block. Okay, Lee, let's move on then. Number 25, January 22nd, 1943, this picture appeared. The caption reads, "The Rocky Mounts prided possession of the turn of the century, the new Marriott Hotel, then located at the corner of Hammond and Main Streets on the side of the present New Ricks Hotel." So the Marriott Hotel preceded the Ricks Hotel. Hotel underwent a change in management in 1906 when Mrs. H.B. Marriott sold it to J.H. Cutrell, and the name was changed to the Cutrell Hotel, under which name it was leased to Mr. T.L. Bland, who came here from Greenville. Okay, let's move on, Lee. Number 26. This is an old picture here dating back to 1905. It's the Chamber of Commerce's predecessor, it says. A fish and meat market, a side view of the City Hall in 1905, showing the entrance to the fire department, the fish market annex, and the meat market of the city, which were at that time located in the building now used by the Chamber of Commerce and the number 1 fire department. Just to the left there, you can see the fire tower, which at least a bit of it. But in any case, 1905, this picture was taken. All right, Lee, let's move on. Number 27. This was the home of the chairman, W. Ed Jeffries, of the county commissioners 40 years ago, located about 4 miles from the city in Nash County, and it was the center of many social, political, and industrial efforts, as Mr. Jeffries himself, the chairman of the 3-member body of county commissioners, had a finger in most everything that affected this city or section. Of course, this is the same Mr. Jeffries that was partners with Mr. Ricks and the brick plant we just spoke about a few minutes ago. Jeffries Road in Rocky Mount is named after him. I'm not sure where this home was, and I don't think it's still standing. I don't quote me on that, I may be mistaken, but I don't think the house is still standing. Okay, Lee, let's move on. Number 28. This is another one of these really old pictures, and it's really grainy, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. It looked better when I first looked at it. Excuse me. But it's the Nashville Spring Hope train on arrival December 1895. And it's just showing the train pulling into the station here in Rocky Mount in 1895 from the Nashville Spring Hope route. Okay, Lee, number 29. February the 5th, 1943, this picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram. And it says, automobiles at a barbecue at Harris Springs. We talked about Harris Springs before. If you don't remember, Harris Springs was where present-day West Haven. It said the spring there was a scene of many outdoor gatherings in former years, and few of them were more popular than the barbecue. On this occasion, there was a close-up of a Model T Ford, the earliest of Mr. Ford's efforts, although the design here shown carries electric lights with oil lamps located on the outside. So that area, West Haven, was developed in the 1920s. But prior to that, it was a popular spot. It was close to the river, obviously. There were springs through there. There was a pond up in there, a little lake, if you will. And it was one of the popular spots for Mr. J.R. Sorsby's crews to go out and go camping and spend a weekend out in the woods and so forth, and fishing on the river and so forth, hunting. All right, Lee, let's move on. Number 30. Rocky Mount Telegram had this appear in the paper for the second time, February 11th, 1943. But the picture dates to 1905. Located at the time in the Masonic Temple building, this is the interior view of Eli Epstein's store. And of course, this original Masonic Temple building is gone. Mr. Epstein removed here from I don't know why it says removed here instead of he moved here, but he came from Goldsboro about the turn of the century and gave the city an establishment to which the well-dressed man referred to with pride. And his modest boast about being a leading store in the largest city in eastern North Carolina, east of Raleigh and north of Wilmington, was never relished or enjoyed by his brother and other relatives that lived in Goldsboro. But there was no room for doubt with the 1910 census, when a devastating fire swept the buildings at the corner of Main and Tarver Street about 1912, including the Parker Jewelry, Snipes Barbershop, Burnett and Williams Insurance Agency, and the Kaiser Drug Store. Mr. Epstein purchased the site from the late J.W. Hines and built the store and established a business which carries his name and is operated by his son, Mr. Leon Epstein, at the present time. So I never knew that Kaiser Drug Store used to be in the general area there where Epstein's is, which is out of business now, but the Epstein building. But that corner of the block caught on fire, all those businesses burned to the ground. And then this gentleman came and bought the block, cleared all the burned remains away, and built Epstein's there. And of course, Kaiser Drug was rebuilt a little bit further down the road on Main Street. All right, let's move on then. Number 31, Rocky Mount Telegram. This appeared for the second time, March the 6th, of 1943. And it's west side of Main Street with the tobacco market in the distance. 1910 was the original date of this picture. Just about dead center of the picture, you see that tower standing up. We've talked about it in the past. That was referred to as a standpipe. It was literally a stand-up pipe that was full of water, and it served the purpose of being both a reservoir for water for the Rocky Mount, as well as tied to the city's water system to provide pressure to water mains and so forth. But 1910 was that picture. Okay, lead number 32. March 13th, 1943, this picture appeared. Water reservoir and settling basin at power station in 1926. Few sections of the city have undergone greater changes in the last 15 years than the city power plant and pumping station on Tar River at Sunset Avenue Extension. Keep in mind that this little caption was written in 1943. It goes on to say, the view shown here above was the intake of 1926 of water from the river into a settling reservoir before being purified and chlorinated to again be pumped into the city's standpipe to the rear of the First Presbyterian Church near Thomas Street. That's what we just showed a moment ago, that standpipe. And it goes on to say, the settling basin has now been closed and the foliage behind the picture has given way for the transformer station connecting the local plant with the Carolina and Virginia Electric Company and the handsome new water purification plant to the north of the highway. The city lake and adjoining 10-acre park with the riding academy beyond Grace and former southern side of the highway. So anyway, this is still there, by the way. It's just those big concrete dome-looking things there by the city lake. That's what these were. They were settling ponds, and they were later covered over by concrete. They're now just storage tanks for water. But in the 1920s, they were settling tanks used to purify water piped from the river. The water would be chlorinated and all the debris removed, and it would be pumped back into town and stored in that stand-up pipe down there off of Main Street. Okay, lead number 33. This appeared March 25th, 1943, and it's when Mayor Tillery lifted the first shovel of dirt on the new post office in 1914. I just mentioned a few moments ago about a tradition of local executives getting together, and either one or many of them sometimes raising a shovel full of dirt to signify construction beginning of a new project. And this is 1914 when the new post office was first begun, a first shovel of dirt, if you will, turned over for the new post office. We're almost out of time. Let's take one more real quick here. March 30, 1943, the Red Cross of Rocky Mount from World War I. The 46 ladies who made up the active workforce of Rocky Mount chapter of the Red Cross in 1917 and 1918. I can't even read this, it's so light here at the bottom. think the standings, maybe, I'm not sure, that looks like it could be the steps of the First Baptist Church, maybe, I'm not sure honestly. But in any case, no, that's not the First Baptist Church, that's too many columns. I don't know where this is, but in any case, it lists all of them by name. But these ladies were all active, involved with the Red Cross, and yeah, I don't think it says where it is. I don't see anywhere there where it makes a mention of. Yes, it does. No, let's see, who were included in the wartime activity in Emergency Hospital at the First Methodist Church. Maybe that's where it was taken. I don't remember the First Methodist Church looking exactly like that. Maybe that's where it was. I'm not sure. Okay, Lee, bring it back to me. We ran clean out of time here. I had a couple more I wanted to show you. I'll save these for next week, and I'm going to do some more digging in this realm. This yesteryear around here, as I said, sometimes the pictures themselves are not as interesting to me anyway as the captions. There's just an awful lot of history that's being presented in these captions, and so it's just really neat to look back and kind of get a glimpse of how things were literally 120 years ago, or more in some cases. Folks, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank those that call. I appreciate your comments and your input always. Have a great week. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to one another, and we'll see you next week with more Way Back Wednesday. Good night.